guys, it's me, Crystal. So today I wanted to talk about my I guess six if I can count my DNF, my 5 least favorite reads of the year. And so I'm going to structure this by starting with the book that I dislike the least and ending with the book that I dislike the most. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make this video because I didn't want to be negative, but I thought it would be fun and I could talk about like a few different books that I probably haven't talked about much this year. So yeah. So the first book on this list would be The Fireman by Joe Hill, and I gave this book 4 stars, so it's not like I didn't like it. I actually liked it a lot, and so this is kind of a testament to the good reading year I had that this book even ended up on this list, but it is on here for a reason. But before I get into that, let me tell you what it's about in case you don't know. So this is a dystopian novel, and there is this virus sweeping throughout the world, and it goes by the street name of Dragon Scale. So basically what happens is you contract the virus, and after the incubation period, you start getting these scaling patterns on your skin, which is how the virus got its name. And then at some point in the not too distant future, you burst into flames and you die. And what makes this so terrifying is that you don't know like when you're going to burst into flames. It could be 3 days after the scale shows up. It could be 3 months. It could be 3 years. It could be never. What's really funny about this book is that I started listening to the audiobook like at the end of last year, and I finished this book in March. And then it's like the beginning of March, and it's like right after I finished this book, it's like, you know, chaos like exploded all over the world. And so the timing of this is like really hilarious. But anyway, so this book is basically on this list for 3 reasons. And that's because ultimately I found this book to be just a little bit too long, a little bit too tense for my personal taste, and also a little bit boring. Part of why I found this so long though is because the audiobook is over 22 hours long, and I tend to have like a max tolerance level before I start getting exhausted of about 10 or 11 hours. So even though I sped this up, I didn't want to speed it up so much I could no longer comprehend the story, so I wasn't able to speed it up enough to keep me from getting completely exhausted. Not to mention a lot of books with like a lot of like high stakes and, you know, just a lot going on, they tend to kind of wear me out anyway. And so like with the lean on top of like there was just so much, like the characters, they just like things just like kept happening, and you think that would be exciting, but in between like all these like high stake events was just like a lot of people just sitting around waiting to die. I really honestly feel like this book could have lost like 250 pages, and it would have been like much more exciting, and then also would have gone by faster, and I could have gotten done with faster, and maybe I wouldn't have been so tired. I think I spent the last half of this book like wanting it to be over. Like I wanted to know what happened, but I was just like so tired already. And then when I was getting this list together, I realized that I had no idea how this book ended. And like there are books I read 10 years ago, there are books I read 15 years ago that I remember better than this book. So there are several like major plot points that I have no recollection of whatsoever. I did go back and reread the ending though, because it was really bothering me that I couldn't remember what happened. Like I remembered, you know, like one aspect of it, but then like the book is called The Fireman, and I'm like, what happened to the fireman? You know, like I could not remember what happened, and I'm like, that's not great. I still stand by my 4 stars for the book because I did have a really good time with it, but it's on this list because I don't remember most of it, and I was kind of frustrated while I was listening to this book. The next book on this list I have a physical copy of, and that is A Wild Winter Swan by Gregory Mcguire, and this is not a very long book. So FYI, this book took me a month to read. And I also give this book 4 stars. So again, it's not like I dislike this book. This book is really atmospheric, and I find Gregory Mcguire's writing to be really charming and just nice. And so it's very cozy and it's very wintry. So this is a retelling of Hans Christian Andersen's The Wild Swans. And it's very similar to the Grimm's brothers, The Six Swans, but basically you have these brothers and they're cursed and they're turned into swans. And so their sister has to make them special shirts and she doesn't have time to finish the youngest brother's shirt, and so he's left with a wing for a left arm. So with a book called A Wild Winter Swan, you'd think the Swan Boy would show up sooner than he did, and he shows up about the halfway mark. And so this book is basically about this girl named Laura, and she got kicked out of her school, and so her grandparents are wanting to send her to this boarding school in Canada. And this story takes place, I want to say not too distant past New York, right around Christmas time. So yeah, like really, really nice, cozy winter, holiday vibes or whatever. But it was a little boring. And while I liked it and I thought it was really charming, and when I finished the book, I was like, oh, that was nice. Like, this is really nice. But like nothing was really happening in this book. It was just kind of like this kind of strange coming of age story. And it's just like, here's Laura going about her day, but it wasn't an interesting day. I think this is what they called writing a book about the mundane, just everyday normal life. But anyway, about halfway through this book, as she's in her room pouting about having to go to this boarding school, she hears like this noise on the roof, and no, it's not Santa Claus, it's this boy with a wing for an arm. And he's like really, really dirty. And so on one hand, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he like went there and made this boy like so dirty. It was foul. But at the same time, I'm like, well, that's what I like about his writing. Like, he's not afraid to have this dirty swan boy come into this house. I feel like most books would like have a slightly cleaner version, but anyway, so him and Laura, like they hang out and she's like trying to hide him. And I wouldn't say that they have some kind of romance. It's just more like they're around the same age and she's like, oh, I kind of like him. And he's like, I mean, she's not bad. I mean, you don't really know what he's thinking, but he seems to like her a little bit. And yeah, it's just a charming short winter story. Yeah. The next book on this list, also another audiobook, was Memoirs and Misinformation by Jim Carrey. And I gave this book 3 stars. I thought overall that it was very interesting. So, first of all, the narrator did an amazing job. He did a really good job, like, capturing, like, Jim Carrey's persona and also capturing the personas of a lot of other celebrity cameos that popped along in the book. And I thought that added, like, a really fun element. And so this book is marketed as being part memoir, part fiction. And honestly, like, I've never been on drugs, but I kind of felt like somebody had slipped me acid while I was trying to listen to this book. I'm sitting there mostly in the car on the way to and from work listening to this, and I'm like, I feel crazy right now. And I couldn't tell what was real because the book starts off with a depressed Jim Carrey, like lying on his bed watching Netflix, and then he becomes obsessed with this actress, and I'm not even sure she's a real person. And then he like goes on this adventure, and it is so weird. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to think. I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea, like the lines between fiction and reality were just like blurring. I mean, obviously the aliens were fiction, but like Nicolas Cage made a lot of cameos, and I just thought that was fabulous because like I could totally see it. He sounded like the narrator sounded like Nick Cage. It felt like the Nick Cage that we feel like we see when he's like out in public being crazy or whatever. And about halfway through this book, it stopped feeling like somebody had slipped me acid and started feeling like I was having a fever dream. I still felt crazy, but I was like starting to enjoy it. And then like by the end, like I was like, this is hilarious. And ultimately, like, yeah, it was like a lot of fun, but it was just like a super trippy reading experience. It's really hard to describe, but I thought it was really fun. But it is like one of the weirdest books I've ever like experienced in my life. And I read a lot of weird books. So far, all the books that I've talked about are books that I did like, but these last two books are the books that I did not like. But before I get into those, I did DNF one book, which I think that's pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty sure I normally DF more books than that. But when I was going back through my list, every other book that I didn't finish or a book that I still plan on finishing at some point. So I wasn't going to talk about this at first because the author is a YouTuber, but it's The Stars We Steal by Alexa Doan, and I'll put a picture of the book up here. And so I saw this book on a list of ARCs that were available to me, and I waited too long to try and request it because it's YA sci-fi, and sci-fis in general are just kind of a hard sell for me, and YA sci-fis are an even harder sell for me. So I went back and forth too long, and then they ran out of books. And so then I saw the library had it, and the library had it on order. And so I was the first person to get this book from the library. So I felt like super special. And then I get this book, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful, and it sounded fun, and it sounded really interesting. But I know how I am with sci-fi. And so like I didn't want to like buy it, and then like I hated it. And so I didn't get that far into the book. I think I got like 50 pages into the book, and I wanted to quit honestly after about 5 pages, but I was, I wanted to give it more time than that. And I haven't watched any of her videos, but I do know she's on YouTube because whenever I'm watching a lot of writing videos, her videos tend to pop up a lot on my feed. So I just didn't want to read it. There wasn't anything bad about it. Like, what I will give this book's like big props for is that I was not lost at all. Normally when I read sci-fi, I'm like, where am I right now? Like, am I in space? Am I on another planet? Is this another universe? Like, I'm always super confused, and they don't ever explain it to me quick enough to keep my interest, and then I bounce. And so and this, I knew exactly where I was. I knew why, we're on a space station just floating through space. I know why we're on a space station floating through space. And I'm like, oh, good. I feel grounded. I feel like I know what's going on, and then like there's this, the main character, she had like this friend, and they like, had kind of a falling out. Like they were like, I guess kind of dating, and then like he proposes, and then she says no, and then I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like, why? And then she tells me why, and I'm like, oh, already? Like, I guess I'm just used to people stringing me along more. And then like Alexa's like, no, I'm not playing around, I'm not gonna string you along. I'm like, that's fine, but now I have no reason to read this book because that's the only thing I cared about. And then I didn't really like the main character, and there was nothing wrong with her, but she was just like not like other girls, and I'm not like other girls, so I do not mind that trope at all. But it's just like, she was smart, and she wasn't like conventionally attractive, and she was kind of dumpy, and she's tall, and I can't relate to the being tall. But I'm just like, I just felt like after 3 chapters, I knew exactly how that book was going to end. And while I didn't have a problem with the book going that way, and I'm 100% sure I'm right, I just like, I already know, and I didn't really want to read it because I'm just like, I'm just not like, I feel like I'm like forcing myself through this book, and I don't really want to. So the last 2 books on this list are both 3 stars, and one of these books I almost wanted to give 2 stars to, but I kind of reserved 2 stars for books that I hated, and I didn't hate any of these books, but I really did not like them. So they're both poetry books, and they're both by Courtney Peppernell. And the first one is Pillar Thoughts 4, and the other one is I Hope You Stay. You see this? Look at that. Kind of like glow. It's nice. Anyway, so first, this one. I've read all the other Pillar Thoughts volumes, and I actually really like them. This is not like my kind of poetry. It's very like uplifting and bright, and while she has the occasional like traditionally formatted poem, most of them are like this. I call this vomit poetry because it's like reading somebody's journal, and it's just like a big clunk of text on the page, and it's really hard on the eyes. But I know that, about her, so I knew that this book would be no different from, most of her other poetry books that I've read. But I guess like at this point, I'm like, I just don't think I can read any more of her poetry because it's just like the same thing all the time. And so this book is more the like, you're wonderful and you're amazing and everything's going to be okay and you're loved and you're wonderful and you're amazing and everything's going to be okay, just like over and over and over again. And I'm just like, dude, get another note. Like, I'm so sick of you trying to lift me up. It's like, you don't know me. Like, let me have a bad day or whatever. Anyway, on that note, this one, it's more in the same vein, but this is the other note that Courtney Pepnell has, because she basically has two gears. It's trying to lift you up, and it's like mooning over someone who left. And so in this one, she goes back and forth between saying, I miss you, and even though I still miss you, I'm going to be okay. Also, if you're missing someone, you're going to be okay. And then it repeats itself over and over and over again. And when I was reading this book, I was like, I almost hate this book. Like, I was so annoyed while I was reading this book, and I was like, dude, I think I'm just gonna have to like stop reading her books for a while, or just, I don't know, wait and see if somebody writes a review and says, wow, she's really done something different this time, because I cannot stand this uplifty, mushy poetry anymore. And I will say, I dislike this quite a bit more than I dislike this, but I gave them the same rating because I don't think this deserves 2 stars, but it's very close for me. I generally don't like to give books less than 2 stars, so that's why 2 stars is like my bottom line. But I think if I was willing to give more books 1 star, I just feel like 1 star is just a little harsh, and I feel like if a book is a 1-star read for me, I just don't finish it. And so that's why I don't tend to give books anything lower than 2. And so since I didn't hate this book, I really didn't like it, but since I didn't hate it, it gets 3 stars. But this really was my least favorite read for the year, which is kind of crazy because I really like poetry, but yeah. So anyway, hopefully that wasn't negative. I just don't want to be rude, but I like talking about books, and I enjoyed talking about the books I didn't like, just as much as I like talking about books I did like, because I just like talking about books or whatever. So yeah. Feel free to share your least favorite read of the year. And next week, I'm going to have my most favorite reads of the year, which I'm super, super excited about. So I will see you then. And I hope you're having a good month so far and that it hasn't been too cold. It's not that cold in the South. We did have a snow day, which was super, super exciting. Of course, it didn't stick because it was like 60 degrees the day before. Yeah, I will see you guys next week, and bye.